Amazing Pilot exposes unexpected truth. Jesus walked on the runway with no one else in sight. Jake Callahan stood at the edge of Maplewood's tiny airport, his heart heavy with the weight of potential lost. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the empty tarmac, a stark contrast to the cold reality he faced. Just months prior, he'd been soaring above the townspeople, leading a fleet of passengers to their destinations. But now he was grounded. One minor mistake, an overlooked checklist item, had cost him everything. His dream job, his pride, and now he hovered on the brink of financial ruin. Surrounded by the ghostly echoes of laughter and chatter that had once resonated through the travel hub, he felt a jarring sense of isolation. With mounting bills and the solemn gaze of his wife Megan at home, stress built within him like a storm cloud. Now, at 38, Jake wrestled with shame and fear. A fear of being a failure to his family, of being a burden when he was supposed to be their protector. Deep within, a voice echoed. How could he face his children, looking into their eyes, knowing their toys would go unbought? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With the clock ticking down to his revelation, the community buzzed in anticipation. The town was abuzz with gossip, questions hanging in the air like smoke. What does he have to say? Is he just trying to save his skin? Jake paced, feeling the smirks and questioning glances behind his back. Doubt gnawed at him. He wasn't just a pilot anymore. He was a textbook example of public disgrace, the beacon of failure in a town that once celebrated him. Yet, amidst the chaos, he stumbled upon a prayer book from his late grandmother, filled with notes written in her careful hand, words of resilience and faith that unwrapped memories, reminding him who he once was. Outside, a storm brewed, mimicking the turmoil in him. The winds howled as he stepped onto the deserted runway, seeking solace in the familiar space. Suddenly, he froze. In a moment that felt surreal yet painfully real, the figure of a man approached. Jesus, his footsteps calm against the tarmac. Jake stood still, trembling as if a thunderclap had reverberated through his soul. How did faith even plug into a life crushed by a single error? This image ignited a mass of contradictions within him. Could it be possible to rise again, to switch gears from despair to determination?
E ele não se pode quebrar como um muro. Uma verdade fundamental, dura e desesperadora.
A year ago, Jake resumed, his voice steadying as he let the words fill the silence. I made a choice that shattered my life and my family. The sharpness of that memory pushed him forward, forcing him to confront the roar of self-judgment echoing in his mind. But this time, he wasn't retreating. That night wasn't just a reckless mistake. It was the culmination of unchecked fears and insecurity. He shifted his weight, an instinctive gesture grounding him. Was he finally ready to unpack the emotional baggage he had carried?
Instead of defending his past self, perhaps he could expose the raw humanity within the struggle, illuminating the path ahead. This isn't just about my error. It's about the fear that clouds our vision, blinding us to the choices we truly face in life, Jake declared, feeling the fiery empowerment of his own revelations. I've spent so long clinging to the remnants of who I was that I forgot to nurture who I could become. The words clarifying his realization hung in the air, resonating not only within him, but rippling through the crowd. He couldn't change what he had done, but could he reclaim his identity? The thought emerged like a fierce light flickering in the vastness of his mind. What if he shifted his narrative from failure to journey? What if his truth included not just his mistakes, but also his ambitions and relentless pursuit of growth? As he cast a glance towards Megan, he experienced a rush of emotions, a complicated weave of love, regret, and determination. In her eyes, he saw both the wounds and a glimmer of possibility. Could she see it too? I need to be more than your past husband. I need to be a partner willing to dive into the depths of what it means to face our challenges together, he said, the vulnerability of his words hanging heavily yet promising in the air. The murmurs of the crowd faded as everyone leaned in, waiting for what Jake would reveal next. This journey isn't solely mine, he continued, finding strength in shared introspection. I want to rebuild not just my life, but our life, Megan. I need you as my compass, someone who can help navigate through the storm ahead. With that heartfelt pledge, a new resolution washed over him. Stepping forward, he felt the crumbling walls of isolation start to fall away, revealing the raw potential of connection and healing. Jake took a deep breath, ready to present the most personal vulnerability he had yet to confront. I'm committed to facing my shortcomings with accountability, but I need more than myself to drive this change, he declared, his heart racing. For the sake of my children and you, I want to seek help. I want to rebuild who I am, gritty and flawed, and be the example of resilience they can look up to. Jake knew the road ahead would be laden with difficulties. Still, he held fast to the burgeoning courage within him.
In that charged atmosphere, buoyed by his commitment to growth, what awaited him beyond this revelation haunted him and yet beckoned with a promise of transformation. What would it look like for me to embrace help? How do I start this next chapter? He pondered, the weighty questions swirling in his mind. With the eyes of the crowd, including Megan's, upon him, Jake took the plunge. "Let's face this journey together. Who's with me?" he called out, feeling hope flicker with every heartbeat. He was finally ready to step into a struggle that could define not just who he was, but the man he aspired to be. But as the applause began to rise, something nagged at Jake's subconscious. A deeper, unacknowledged fear loomed just outside the periphery of his thoughts. Was he truly ready to unearth the extent of his buried pain, or would confronting it threaten to overturn the fragile equilibrium he had just begun to forge? Amidst the thunderous applause, a surge of mixed emotions washed over Jake. Acceptance and trepidation clawed at him in equal measure. He stood at a precipice. The ground beneath him felt both sturdy and treacherous. With every nod and smile from the audience, he grappled with a resounding question. Was he truly prepared to accept the consequences of his past and face the shadows looming within?
The applause faded into murmurings, creating a comforting yet disorienting cocoon. Suddenly, he felt Megan's hand, warm and reassuring, slip into his own. It was a gesture that anchored him amidst the chaos. Could this simple act of connection sustain him as he ventured into the depths of his insecurities? "Jake," she whispered, just loud enough to be heard over the fading applause, "it's okay to be scared. Just remember, you don't have to do this alone." Her words sent a ripple through him. The acceptance of fear as a companion rather than an enemy was foreign yet comforting. For too long he had allowed fear to shackle him, another weight in the emotional baggage he carried. But in that moment it transformed into fuel for his journey ahead. Perhaps embracing vulnerability would unlock hidden strengths he hadn't acknowledged before. He turned back to the audience, their faces now a mixture of support and curiosity. Jake took a deep breath, drawing upon the courage bubbling within him. "It seems fitting," he began, "that the journey of growth starts with acknowledging not just the mistakes, but also the lessons hidden within them." Instantly, he felt the slight shift in the atmosphere, as if everyone collectively leaned in to hear the unfolding truth. "I've spent my life pursuing goals that I thought would define my success. I chased job titles, accolades, and the image of what a perfect father and husband should be. But in that relentless pursuit, I lost sight of what truly builds a life worth living. Authentic connection, emotional honesty, and resilience in the face of adversity," he confessed, feeling a clarity he hadn't experienced in years.
As he spoke, Jake unspooled a narrative unfurling in real time. Each confession echoed deeper truths, painting a clearer picture of who he wanted to be. His awareness broadened, revealing the dim edges of his identity he had long neglected. The ache of realized dreams began to transform into the excitement of expectations, a different kind of success that was now within his grasp. "Megan, I want to reinstate that primal bond we once had," he said, his voice thick with meaning. "But to do that, I must first rally the strength to face the most difficult truths about myself. I want to confront my guilt, my fears, and my insecurities, no matter how unsettling they become. It's crucial to emerge from these shadows so we can step forward into the light together." The room buzzed with anticipation. He could see curiosity glistening in the eyes of his peers, empathy and understanding spilling forth like a wave. He was not merely speaking about his past, he was weaving a tapestry of shared human experiences. "But I know this journey will not be linear. There will be moments I stumble and falter. The road may twist in ways I cannot foresee, leading me into self-doubt when I least expect it. And yet, this is the crux of resilience. It's embracing vulnerability with the conviction that, despite my flaws, I possess the capacity for growth that could inspire others." He glanced at the crowd, feeling their collective breath as they anticipated what he would say next. "I'm ready for every bit of help I can gather. I'm committed to seeking counseling, to prioritizing therapy so I may finally unpack my past." Those words ignited his resolve further. There was no turning back now. Jake paused, taking in the breadth of what he had just committed to, when a thought nudged at the back of his mind, an unsettling possibility waiting to surface. What if addressing his insecurities unearthed hidden resentments within those closest to him?
What would he do if confronted by voices from his past, holding him accountable in ways he wasn't prepared to face? Eager yet apprehensive, he pumped himself up for his next challenge. I will battle through the discomfort and confusion because that's where transformation lies. As I prepare for this next chapter, I intend to embrace every layer of who I am, and I invite you all to bear witness to my journey. With newfound vigor coursing through him, Jake stood at the edge of vulnerability and resolved to charge ahead. The applause faded into silence, yet the urgency of his determination vibrated in the air around him as he faced the unknown, one step closer to unearthing impacts of a self he had barely begun to understand. But as he caught Megan's gaze, a blend of encouragement and concern, Jake felt a whisper of fear persist. Not just regarding his outer journey, but something much deeper lurking just beneath the surface of his consciousness. What would happen when the time came to confront those painful pieces of himself he had so long avoided? For he knew, however daunting, facing them was the only way forward. As the applause faded into a distant echo, Jake found himself standing on the precipice of a new journey, one that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The adrenaline pumping through him was accompanied by an unsettling quietude, a sudden shift from the warmth of shared energy to an internal landscape riddled with questions. What would it feel like to confront his deepest insecurities? How would he reconcile the burden of his past with the man he was determined to become? He felt Megan's presence beside him, a grounding force amidst the chaos of his swirling thoughts. Her unwavering support was comforting, yet it also stirred a sense of urgency within him. It was as if the universe was whispering that the time had come for action, not just reflection. Jake took a deep breath, driven by an impulse to survey his next steps. He knew there was no escaping the reality of his struggles. The glaring truth lingered like a shadow. Addressing his past might unveil more than just his failures. It could bring to light hidden resentments from those close to him, and the thought sent a shiver down his spine. Unresolved emotions loomed like specters he had long kept at bay. The following day, fortified by resolve, Jake made the decision to initiate therapy. He chose a therapist known for confronting emotional barriers head-on. As he sat in the waiting room, surrounded by familiar yet foreign faces, a pang of vulnerability surged. What would he share? Would he be able to articulate the anguish and guilt that were heavy on his soul? Every tick of the clock amplified his anxiety. Then the door opened, and a woman with kind eyes gestured for him to enter. As he walked in, he willed himself to remain open, to let down the walls he had so meticulously constructed. She greeted him warmly, and for the first time in years, Jake felt a flicker of safety amidst the chaos he had come to recognize as his life. The first session was a jumble of thoughts, each one tumbling over another in haste. He spoke about the facade of success he had built, the strain it imposed on his relationships, particularly with Megan and his children. Suddenly, he was no longer just recounting events. He was unearthing feelings he had suffocated for too long. "Why do you think you bury these emotions?" the therapist asked, her gaze steady and probing. Jake faltered. The question brooded in him like a tempest. I guess I thought it made me stronger. I believed hiding my fears would protect my family and myself. That's a common perception, she replied, her tone gentle but unyielding. But true strength often resides in vulnerability. Her words struck him with unexpected clarity. Could it be that the very qualities he sought to shield were, in fact, the key to his redemption?
As the sessions progressed, confronting various traumas became integral to his growth. With every revelation, layers of self-doubt and guilt peeled away. He spoke about feelings of inadequacy as a father, the nagging voice that critiqued every parenting decision. He acknowledged his past mistakes, moments marred by selfishness and neglect. Yet, as he learned to confront one ghost after another, new layers of determination sprouted forth. The boundaries between his identities, the flawed human and the aspiring father, began to dissolve, merging into a more authentic self. In the space of every session, Jake discovered unexpected resilience. He cultivated deeper empathy for his own struggles, leading him to genuinely connect with Megan on different levels than he thought possible. Each day, it felt as if he was chiseling away at the marble around his heart, revealing a shape he had almost forgotten existed. Then came the moment he anticipated with a twinge of dread. One session delved deep into the realm of forgiveness, not just forgiving himself, but also needing to seek forgiveness from Megan and his children. The thought of laying himself vulnerable defensively resurfaced. "What are you afraid of?" the therapist pressed gently but firmly. Jake hesitated, but the answer bubbled to the surface swiftly. "What if they don't forgive me? What if it's too late to mend the damage?" The words hung heavy in the air, laden with the weight of his fears. This was more than just a discussion. It was a confrontation with the potential fallout from unearthing his past. How would he respond if their hurt manifested not as understanding, but as anger? He left that session with a lingering apprehension, aware that confronting his family might trigger their own buried emotions and resentment. The urgency of the need to connect gnawed at him, beckoning him forward, while his fears incessantly whispered retreat. The crossroads lay ahead, and he stood uneasy in his resolve. Would he find the courage to speak the uncomfortable truths? Would healing come, or would his revelations ignite past grievances anew? The answers seemed just out of reach, reinforcing the intensity of his internal conflict. But if he truly wanted to step towards growth, he knew he could no longer delay the inevitable reckoning. The moment approached for him to take a step into the unknown that could irrevocably alter his familial landscape. An emotional leap he knew he must take if he ever hoped to truly move forward. As days turned into a blur of therapy sessions, Jake found himself caught between the weight of his past and the promise of his potential future. Each week he simmered with anticipation and dread as the moments of honesty pushed against the walls he once believed impenetrable. Conversations became agonizingly necessary. But the thought of opening up, of laying bare the wounds, was like jumping into ice-cold water. The session before the one he dreaded most left him feeling raw. Jake had confided to his therapist about a recent argument with Megan that spiraled into painful accusations. It shattered his perceived control, exposing vulnerabilities he'd fought to hide. She reminded him that conflict often revealed deeper connections and unresolved feelings.
With those words echoing in his mind, Jake felt the fabric of his resolve begin to unravel. However, he also felt a surge of determination growing within him. This conflict was an opportunity for growth, if he could navigate it correctly. It was time to step outside his comfort zone, to challenge the fear that had whispered caution for far too long. When the day arrived to speak to Megan and the kids, Jake couldn't shake the trepidation coursing through his veins. He practiced what he would say, rehearsing every emotion he intended to express. But as he steeled himself, doubt crept in. What if his children reacted with confusion? What if Megan withdrew her support, feeling betrayed rather than understanding? He remembered what his therapist had said about the strength residing in vulnerability. He'd faced some of his truths before, but now he stood on the brink of revealing his heart to those he loved the most. This time, the stakes felt higher. His commitment to authenticity flickered, reigniting a spark of hope that perhaps this reckoning could heal not just himself, but also his family. Gathered around the dining table that evening, Jake's heart raced, yet he couldn't let fear dictate his next move. He glanced at Megan, who looked at him with a mixture of concern and support, her eyes asking if he was ready. "Can we talk?" he began, each word weighing on him as if he were lifting a heavy anchor. Silence filled the air. The children stopped their chatter, looking up at him as he struggled to collect his thoughts. "I've had some time to think about things, about how I've been distant, and how that must have hurt you all." He took a breath, watching their faces, searching for signs, any signs at all, of willingness to engage. Megan nodded carefully, encouraging him silently to continue. "I've carried a lot of guilt and shame for how I've acted, and for not being the father and husband you deserve. I want to change that. I want to work on myself for you, for us." Jake saw the flicker of understanding in Megan's gaze, but the children's expressions were inscrutable. The weight of his confessions filled the room, thickening the air between them. He feared he was pouring gasoline on smoldering embers of resentment rather than soothing them. "What do you mean?" Megan finally asked, breaking the stillness. "You've been working so hard. We've seen that." "I thought that's all I needed to do," Jake replied, his voice low but steady. "But I realize now that being a good provider isn't enough if it comes at the cost of being emotionally present. I have to face my past so I can be a better version of myself. I owe that to each of you and to myself." Jake saw the flicker of understanding in Megan's gaze, but the children's expressions were inscrutable. The weight of his confessions filled the room, thickening the air between them. He feared he was pouring gasoline on smoldering embers of resentment rather than soothing them. "What do you mean?" Megan finally asked, breaking the stillness. "You've been working so hard. We've seen that." "I thought that's all I needed to do," Jake replied, his voice low but steady. "But I realize now that being a good provider isn't enough if it comes at the cost of being emotionally present. I have to face my past so I can be a better version of myself. I owe that to each of you and to myself."
Eu estou cansado, cansado de estar aqui, cansado de não poder mudar. Let's have a family meeting this weekend. We can all share our feelings. We should encourage them to be honest with us, like you just were. Jake felt his pulse quicken.
It was an opportunity, an open door through which they could step into a collective healing. But he also knew this was only the beginning of a daunting journey, fraught with risks he could hardly fathom. Would they collectively summon the courage to face their grief, or would this attempt to bridge the gap expose deeper fissures, threatening his resolve? The path ahead felt perilous, yet he understood the enormity of what lay ahead through this newfound bond. Perhaps this family meeting could catalyze a vulnerability that shattered long-held fears. As the weight of uncertainty lingered in the air, Jake resolved himself to meet it head-on, no longer a passive participant, but an active force in the evolution of their family. With hope tempered by apprehension, he contemplated the impending discovery. What truths would emerge that could fracture or heal their connections? His heart raced as he prepared to engage in the chaos of emotions ahead, desperate to unearth the promise of a future forged through collective strength. Jake paced the living room, a palpable tension coiling around him as he replayed the conversation with Megan. The prospect of the family meeting loomed ahead like a cliff's edge. His thoughts spiraled with urgent questions. How would their children react? Which feelings should he explore? And what truths would challenge their fragile connection? A profound determination began to take root. He understood that he needed not only to talk, but to create a safe space where all could voice feelings that had long lingered in silence. For so long, he had overlooked the emotional landscape of his family, immersed in his own battles. Now, awareness prickled at the edges of his consciousness, a call to arms for connection. He glanced down at his phone, the screen displaying family photos, smiling faces frozen in time, moments untouched by the weight of their struggles. He was desperate to return to that version of them, yet he knew it was time to dissolve the veneer of happiness, to confront the deeper currents that had separated them. He envisioned the setup for the meeting. The dining table, usually cluttered with school papers and unfinished projects, would instead be cleared, a blank canvas for their collective healing. Smoothing his hands over it, he made a silent pact. This would be their space for honest dialogue. No distractions, no defenses. What would the kids say? Jake recalled their expressions lately, pensive, distant. His heart clenched. He had to prepare himself for the potential shards of hurt thrown into the conversation. Could he handle it without retreating? As the weekend approached, Jake was restless, his mind flooded with strategies to navigate this emotional terrain.
His vision shifted from the idyllic family he yearned for to the possibility of unveiling darker emotions. Perhaps their eldest, Aaron, would voice resentment. Perhaps Lily would speak of feeling invisible. Each awaited revelation could push or pull them apart further. And yet, the thought of facing these fears ignited a flicker of courage. He could no longer allow his past mistakes to dictate the present. They all deserved authenticity, even if it came wrapped in uncomfortable truths. Over the next few days, Jake found himself engaging in small, intentional actions. He helped Lily with her homework without her needing to ask, listened intently to Aaron describe his latest interests, and carved out moments for Megan amidst their busy routines, hoping his efforts would set the stage for the conversation ahead. With each interaction, he felt a slight shift within him, an evolution from mere duty toward genuine involvement. The morning of the family meeting, he rose early, anxiety churning in his stomach.
He brewed coffee, letting the rich aroma wrap around him like a comforting blanket. Every cup he poured felt symbolic, transformation brewing. As he laid out a simple breakfast, he reflected on how easy it could be to fall back into old patterns, to cling to surface-level interactions. Yet it was time to earnestly engage, to acknowledge the chaos beneath their simple meals. When everyone gathered around the table, Jake took a deep breath, eyes scanning the room. Megan's tentative smile, Aaron's cautious demeanor, and Lily's bright, questioning gaze. Each face reflected a different piece of the emotional puzzle he sought to solve. But he also noticed something tangible, a hint of anticipation in the air, an invitation to explore uncharted territory together. As they began sharing their thoughts, the first crack formed in the facade. Jake felt vulnerable, exposed. Yet as he spoke, mirroring the lessons he had learned from Megan, he sensed a shifting dynamic. The deep-seated fears began to surface, swirling in the air like the steam from their coffee. Aaron's voice trembled. "I've felt like you didn't even notice me for a long time, Dad." The words struck like a bell tolling through the stillness. Jake's heart sank, but he knew he needed to embrace this moment, to respond with empathy and acknowledgement, no matter how painful it felt. What other truths awaited discovery, and how would each revelation shape their family's evolving narrative? As he steadied himself for the journey ahead, Jake couldn't shake the unease coursing through him. It was clear this was the beginning of deep-seated emotions being unearthed, and he feared how it might reshape their identities. In that charged atmosphere, he grasped the gravity of the moment. Could they emerge stronger from this reckoning, or would they find themselves more fractured? What raw truths would surface, and how would they redefine his understanding of fatherhood and partnership?
The answers loomed, beckoning just out of reach as he preparado a giornare deeper into hidden vulnerabilitas and unexamined feelings. As Jake absorbed Aaron's comment, a suffocating silence fell over the table. Every moment stretched, the weight of each gaze barreling down on him like a tidal wave. He had braced himself for discomfort, but the jab of truth was sharper than he anticipated. Anguish pulsed through him, not just from Aaron's words, but from the realization of how disconnected he had allowed himself to become. Somehow he needed to unravel this knot of emotions tightly wound around their family. He weighed his options. Retreating into his usual defenses would be easy, but he recognized that it would only deepen the fissures they'd worked so hard to crack open. Instead, Jake resolved to hold space for his son's pain. "I haven't been the dad you needed, Aaron," he said, vulnerability cracking through the steady facade he often wore. "I see now how much I missed while trying to keep everything together." Megan's eyes flicked toward him, a curious blend of admiration and concern, mirroring the same thoughts swirling in Jake's mind. He could feel the stakes rising, the tides shifting underfoot. What if this admission only added fuel to the fire? What if it exposed deeper wounds he'd been too fearful to confront? Lily's brow furrowed, her youthful innocence not yet sheltered by the burden of adult expectations. "Do you mean you're going to try harder?" she asked innocently, wrapping her small fingers around her glass. The question struck him harder than even Aaron's confession. It was an accusation that belied hope, a plea for assurance that he hadn't strayed too far to notice them. "Let's talk more about that," Jake suggested.
his tone now more tentative yet still resolved. "What does it look like for me to try harder?" He opened the floor, hoping to dig deeper into the fissures that had formed over years of neglect. Aaron shifted in his seat, his body screaming for attention that had long been silenced. "I don't want you to just listen," he said, a crack in his voice betraying the anger laced with heartbreak. "I want to be seen. You missed everything. My tournament, my grades slipping, I felt invisible." Each revelation was like a dagger, carving deeper into Jake's psyche. But behind the hurt lay an opportunity, an invitation to validate Aaron's feelings and acknowledge the gravity of their consequences. Instead, Jake leaned into the moment. "You're right. I have been blind," he replied, letting the truth settle. "But I'm here now, and I want to change that." As the conversation progressed, Jake found that vulnerabilities appeared not only from him, but were coaxed out of Megan and Lily too. Megan spoke of her own feelings of loneliness amidst the chaos of family and work, a silent ache he had been oblivious to. The once clear barriers began to blur, exposing the entangled emotions everyone had kept buried.
With every shared experience, Jake felt the air shift, a rare warmth set against the chill of honesty. Their words formed the foundation of a new narrative, one built on transparency rather than avoidance. Yet, even amidst the fragile connections forming, Jake wrestled with a nagging doubt. Were they truly making progress, or simply scratching the surface? The meeting lingered in the air like the remnants of a storm, with the underlying question looming larger than before. How deep did their wounds go, and how much more would he need to confront about himself to truly mend the rifts within his family? Just as he thought they might crest the wave of understanding, Aaron steered the conversation even deeper. "Dad, it's not just about seeing me," he said thoughtfully, his voice gaining traction. "What do you want from us? Do you even want to be here?" The inquiry hung heavy, a challenge and accusation that rattled Jake to his core. Inside, he felt the ground quake beneath him, pushing him closer to a moment of truth he had avoided for too long. Could he muster the courage to articulate not just his intentions, but the deeper truths he had buried away? The path before him twisted with uncertainty, yet it beckoned with the promise of transformation. What revelations awaited him, and could they still forge a cohesive family from the fragments of despair? As Jake prepared to answer, he realized the time had come not just to confront the past, but to redefine what his future as a father and a husband would look like. Jake closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling deeply to gather his thoughts. The tension around the table was electric, a combination of anticipation and fear. And he knew he stood on the brink of not just revealing his truth, but of shaping a new reality for his family. "I want to be here, Aaron. I truly do," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "But I realize now that wanting isn't enough. To be present, to be engaged, it has to come with action. I've focused so much on just trying to provide, believing that it would be enough, but in doing so, I lost sight of what really matters." The silence that followed felt less charged with anger and more saturated with possibility. Each family member leaned in, their curiosity piqued.
Jake sensed a shared hunger. They all yearned for connection, for authenticity they had missed for far too long. "I'm committed to showing up for you, both at school events and in the small moments," he continued, warmth rolling off his words. Megan's eyes softened, sensing the sincerity laced within Jake's declarations. She had fought against the isolation, and now, for the first time, she could see a glimmer of understanding emerging from him. "But," Jake added, the intensity in his voice rising slightly, "I can't do this alone. I need your support, too."